Welcome to 28.5 Women's Basketball, where we explore a unique and authentic perspective on the women's game, break down upcoming matchups, and discuss the latest news and trends in women's basketball. We are your hosts. I'm Sydney Story, and I played basketball at the University of Tennessee under Pat Summitt.
And I'm Becca Goodman, and I played at the University of Notre Dame under Muffet McGraw. And we're thrilled to have you join us today. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to tune in each week and don't forget to follow, download, and listen to give an assist and share the love. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hello, everybody, and hello, Sid. Welcome back. I'm so glad we get to chat about this week's games. How's it going?
It's going well. We're headed towards the thick of conference, and you can feel it. Being in conference play, like we've mentioned, there are a lot of good conference matchups this year, so it's going to be a lot of fun, and it has been a lot of fun, that's for sure.
Yeah, this weekend kind of surprised me with how many games it flip-flopped, right? A lot of the higher ranking teams either somewhat struggled and then won, but it wasn't a convincing win, right? It could have kind of went either way depending on how the game went. And then as one of our quarters is going to mention, we have a ton of upsets. I think that's just the thick of conference play, and you have to be ready day in and day out because anybody can knock you off. It might not bother you right then, but you never know where that shakes out when it comes to conference tournament, NCAA tournament, and so forth going forward. So jumping into our quarters, high level, our first quarter, we're going to talk about the LSU versus Tennessee game. Then we're going to jump to our second quarter where we're going to talk about South Carolina playing Texas. Third quarter, we're going to talk about a historic comeback. That'll be good news to jump into. And then our fourth quarter is going to be the upsets. So let's get started.
Let's get rolling with quarter number one. So we've got LSU taking on Tennessee. And this is a great SEC matchup year in, year out, decade after decade. There's been a ton of LSU Tennessee matchups that have been just stellar games. And this game did not disappoint. It went down to the wire. It was at Tennessee. And we've got LSU coming in, and you look at Kim Mulkey and what she brings to women's basketball. It is absolutely amazing what this woman has accomplished in women's basketball, what she's done for the game. I want to spend a little bit of time and highlight Kim Mulkey in some of those things that she's done. So since the inception of the NCAA Women's Tournament in 1982, she has participated as a player or a coach every year except for in 1985 and in 2003. So she has been one of those staples who has just consistently been a part of the game, which is really cool. And people talk about, absolutely, right? People talk about how great of a player she was at Louisiana Tech, was able to win a national championship there. And then you see what she did, and we all got to watch what she did at Baylor and now at LSU. She's just such a staple for the game and really has done a ton. She's the first coach in NCAA basketball history to win a natty as both a player, an assistant coach, and a head coach, which is really cool for the women's game. It just shows she was able to transfer her skills as a player and also be a successful coach, which you don't see a ton, right? Just because you were a good player doesn't make you a great coach. So to see her be able to succeed in both facets of the game is pretty cool. Kim played for Pat. So now let's flip back to the game here. LSU playing Tennessee. So Kim did play for Pat on the Olympics. And really, you hear Kim talk about it quite a bit. She looked up to Pat. Pat was one of her mentors. She would talk to Pat a lot about being a mother and balancing coaching with motherhood. And she really leaned on Pat for some of that advice. Obviously, I know they talked a ton of X's and O's because we would hear Pat talking about it also. So a lot of respect for the Tennessee program overall. Obviously, there's a new coach at Tennessee in Kim Caldwell, but just kind of cool to hear some of that history. And if you look at Kim Mulkey in total, she has 40 years of coaching experience. So she is just, like I mentioned, that staple, steady Eddie figure in the game. So shout out to Kim Mulkey. Thanks for all that you do. Thanks for all you have done for the women's game, because these stats don't do it any justice, that's for sure. So pretty cool there. Headed back to the game here. So we've got Tennessee number 16 versus LSU number 6 at the time. Again, the game's in Knoxville. Both teams are top 3 in scoring in the nation. So they both play a very fast, up-tempo game. Both teams, interestingly enough, and we talk about this a lot, didn't necessarily play tough non-conference games heading into the SEC. To see how LSU responds now that they're playing better competition. And same with Tennessee, right? So that's going to be really telling for them in the SEC as we head into it here. For Tennessee, you've got Spear and Cooper who really lead the charge on the scoring side. We talk a ton about how Tennessee plays 5 in, 5 out. So you've got a lot of players on the Tennessee bench, a lot of players on the Tennessee team that are playing tons of minutes. If you look at Tennessee heading into this game, Tennessee has allowed over 300 more points from their opponents than LSU.
That's crazy.
So the theme of this whole thing, and I'm going to try to come back to it a couple of times, is old school versus new school.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we talk about Kim Mulkey having coached for decades now and been a part of this big level, the D1, Final Four type levels. And you talk about some of her mentors like a Pat Summitt, right? Some of these more old school mentalities. And then you look at Kim Caldwell on the Tennessee side, and it's the new school. It's the 5 in, 5 out. Let's run and gun. Let's try to get up and press all game and 3-ball all game. So very interesting to see both styles clashing here a little bit. On the LSU side, they are star-studded. You've got Flau'jae, who has really gotten better every year of her career. So in 22-23, she averaged 11 points per game. In 23-24 season, she averaged 14.9 points per game. So far this season, she's averaging 19.7 points per game. She really has gotten better every season, which is really cool to see Flau'jae play and really elevate her game in that regard. And then Anissa Morrow, she's just phenomenal. And we'll talk about her stats in this game. She really is that steady Eddie for LSU and a tough girl to stop. Like whatever team is playing LSU, that's the number one, to me, the number one name you've got to highlight on the scouting report and be like, how do we stop her from doing what she does? She does it on the scoring column. She does it on the rebounding column, but she is all over the place. Really, really solid play for LSU. Let's head into the first quarter of the game here. So the first quarter is the only quarter that Tennessee technically loses. They lose the first quarter 26-17. I thought Tennessee was careless with the ball. A few possessions in a row, LSU was able to capitalize on that. And when we talk about having to play 4 full quarters, if Tennessee would have played a better first quarter, they would have won this game to me by 10. Handedly, they would have won it. But because they come out, they're careless with the ball, LSU is able to have 34 fast break points.
Crazy.
Towards the end of this game here, 34 of them. And we talk about that press that Tennessee's putting out there. LSU handled that press, if you ask me. Like, it was not a problem for them. They had a ton of fast break points off of it. So interesting there. But back to the first quarter here. After the first quarter, LSU had 18 points in the paint. Tennessee had 0. So it's just this back to this old school versus new school mentality. If you watch LSU, they're attacking the rack hard. They're trying to draw defenders. They're trying to utilize their post players. That's more of the old school look at it. Whereas if you watch Tennessee, yes, they'll attack the basket, don't get me wrong, but they're settling for the 3-ball a lot more. You're not seeing the traditional post play like you see when you watch LSU. So very interesting there to watch that. Second quarter rolls around. LSU continues to build the lead. They build it to 18 points. So back-to-back games, we see Tennessee get down like they did. So they get down by 18 points in this one with about 6 minutes and 30 seconds left in the second quarter. Tennessee's able to close it down about 7 by half. LSU's up 46-39 at the halftime there. So interesting to see. We talk about this. Can Tennessee come back and get back in this one? And sure enough, they do. They've got a decent, strong start to the third quarter. Spear is absolutely huge for Tennessee in this LSU game. And she's been playing excellent in SEC play. She's a ton of fun to watch. She really is that leader that Tennessee needs. And they were talking about it. Commentators are picking up on it a little bit when they talk to the coaches and they attend shoot-arounds. Like, they're really talking about how Spear brings that leadership for Tennessee. And I think that's awesome to see. I don't know if we necessarily saw that earlier in the season, but to see a leader emerge like that is pretty cool. Spear did finish the game with 25 points, right? So not only is she leading and getting her team where they need to be, but she's getting it done on the offensive end, which is pretty cool there. So I want to go back and ask you a question here, Becca. So LSU's up by 7 points at half. They had gotten up by like roughly 18 points in the second quarter. So usually, okay, Tennessee goes on their run. They cut it to 7 points heading in to halftime there. Usually as a coaching staff, you're asking yourself, okay, what do we need to do differently in the second half versus this first half, right? Obviously things aren't necessarily working. LSU's doing XYZ and they're beating us up. How do we counter some of this? It's interesting, though. I want to get your take on it because Tennessee does not have halftime adjustments, really, right? They stick to their style. What are your thoughts on that against some of these good teams like LSU?
It's crazy to me that the lack of adjustments can either make or break a game or a whole season for you, right? So I think it's nuts that Tennessee by the end of this game shoots 31 threes. And I know that's their style, that's expected. But if you're not hitting and you're not making those and your percentage is dropping, you got to find another way, another opportunity to score. And then when you look at points in the paint, LSU 60, Tennessee 30, I mean that is huge. Those are layups. I mean that's all within mid-range in the paint. And I find it crazy that Tennessee doesn't have like a backup plan. I will say you mentioned Spear being like, had a great game, slowly coming on, being kind of one of the players that, commentators are knowing about. I just looked at her minutes. She played 32 minutes. So it's interesting to see that. Remember we talked about, are they just going to go 5-5 and like you play half the game? What if you're hitting? What if you're on? So she led the team with the most minutes per game that game, playing 32. So I mean, it's nice to know that Coach Cladwell is like also making adjustments when it comes to keeping players in that are scoring for you and rolling. But yeah, it's going to be tough if they don't have actual X's and O's that they can break down and add to games when they're struggling.
I completely agree with you, Becca. Wouldn't it be interesting to be able to watch a practice and
man.
see what are they working on? And obviously the three ball, obviously the press a ton. She talks about how she works on defense a ton. I remember all the times that we demoed and shelled and against our practice players, we'd put different time on the clock with different scoreboard, and we would just work through time and possession, game-like situations down the stretch. And that's where you learn a ton of that IQ is in practice. Right? It's too late to learn it in the game, to your point. So,
yeah.
And some of these players have a lot of that IQ. They're at Tennessee. They're playing Big D1 for a reason. They had probably good coaches in high school for the most part. So not saying they're not capable of it, but when you don't work on it as a unit and as a team, it's hard to do those adjustments on the fly if it's not something that's a part of your system.
And I think the IQ piece, yes, you have that in order to get into college, but it's just so much more advanced when you're in there. And time, possession, end of quarter situation, I mean, like there's a situation for every minute of that college clock. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's pretty crazy to see, for instance, the post player who shot the 3-point shot in the last game where they still had time to maybe take a drive. Like those are habits, and it's really hard to break habits such as launching a three because that's our style. So I think they have to make a difference between what our style is versus what a habit is. And then how do we make it based on the game situation? Where are we? And which one are we going to use?
Right. Absolutely. Again, I totally agree. I think back-to-back games here for Tennessee versus Oklahoma, now versus LSU, they have stuck with the game plan because that's what they do. And so they've been able to get back in these games. I don't know if that happens against a South Carolina the way they're playing right now, against some of these other really good teams in the SEC, and then certainly down the stretch in tournament play. I hope it does, right? I'm a Lady Vol, so I root for everything we're doing out there. I'd want to play for Kim. I think she's sounds like and appears to be a player's coach and really cares about her players and all that good stuff. So that's great to see. It's just interesting to see how this style is going to play out. And I root for it because it is something different. It's entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time that we've had a disruption like this in the game. And the style is a complete disruption. Kim Mulkey even said it. I've never had to prepare for a team that plays this style with what Kim does. So very interesting. Headed back to the game. In the fourth quarter, it goes down to the wire here. So Tennessee gets a steal. They hit a three ball to tie it with 32 seconds left to go in the game. With 8 seconds to go, Gilbert for LSU has it at the top. Previously, Kim Mulkey had called the timeout. So you see Gilbert get the ball here. She takes time off the clock. With about a couple seconds to go, she attacks the paint. She maneuvers. She leans in. She does almost like a left-handed trick shot around the defender and scores it at the buzzer to win. So LSU wins this one 89-87. It truly goes down to the wire. So by sticking with that game plan, Tennessee was able to overcome an 18-point deficit against a really good team. And let's talk about LSU for a second, because we haven't highlighted LSU a ton for their ranking and what they've been able to do this year. You and I have been kind of skeptical about LSU. What are your thoughts now seeing LSU play a couple SEC games now?
Early on, they played some easy popcorn games. Getting in a season, I think maybe those games just prepared their team to get into new roles, right? Anissa Morrow is a guard. She is a guard. She was a three, a stretch three last year when Angel Reese was inside. And this is why when people or girls or parents or they have in their mind, well, I'm not a post player, I'm not a guard, why limit yourself by being one dimensional? Anissa Morrow is point blank, full stop, the most versatile player I feel in women's basketball, because she's basically taking on what Angel Reese left, in addition to still having that pull-up game that is just as dominant depending on who's guarding her. So the versatility that she brings to points in the paint, rebounding, helping bring the ball up, pull up, 3-point, like she can do it all. She's just doing what is going to make her team successful by basically playing inside, because she has that dominant presence. And to be honest with you, like, to be a post player and to be inside and be, you're banging with girls, it's physical, you're fighting, she has the body, and you kind of have to have the mentality as well, right? It's not always, you're not always going to get 20 points, but she seems to do it because she just has that never stop mentality, slightly what Angel Reese had, but she just has a deeper skill set because she's not limited and she's extremely versatile.
She is so talented. And Kim Mulkey talks about she knows one speed. She goes hard every practice, every workout, every game, every possession. Kind of like a Hannah Hidalgo. I mean, that girl goes flat out, all out every possession too. Anissa Morrow in the Tennessee game has 21 rebounds and 23 points.
That's crazy.
I mean, when was the last time you saw that?
I mean, like a double-double, yes, but not a double-double with 20 plus in each. Like that's pretty amazing. I know we've had some stats on some other players here where it's been close, but the thing is with Anissa Morrow, I feel like she can do that every game if she wants to. She's that talented.
She really is. It's going to be fun to watch LSU down the stretch for sure.
Absolutely. And I do want to, one little plug about, you had a great intro about Kim Mulkey and kind of what she's done for the game. But did you notice that she gave the Tennessee coach a present? Did you hear this?
No, that's cool.
She said she's a new mom, and every new mom that is coaching, I always give them a little present. And then she made a joke. She's like, it's an LSU onesie. And it was just a joke, but it was so funny. And it was also so on brand, right? Kim Mulkey she's entertaining. She's the glitch. She's the show on the sidelines, but she's also that staple in women's basketball, supporting other women who are moms, doing the job she knows is hard and continuing to support them. So props to Kim Mulkey for just being awesome and adding those little touches of sentimental stuff.
That's super cool. Love that. All right, Beck, why don't you take us into our second quarter here?
Oh, yes. The second quarter is where we're going to deep dive into the South Carolina against Texas game. This game had so much hype, kind of as much as, Notre Dame, Texas, just because it was a top five, two top five teams. Texas being the number 5 for this one and South Carolina being the number 2. In the end, spoiler alert, South Carolina wins 67-50. This game was so tough to watch. I think it was the expectations were just so high. And when a whole team just struggles to score, it takes the wind out of the sails. It even, right? Imagine if you're Texas and halfway through the first quarter, you're 2 of 16 from the floor, and one of your players, Oldacre, has 6 offensive rebounds in the middle of the first quarter, just because it's shot, rebound, shot, rebound. It was a struggle, and I I will tell you, I feel so awful for Madison Booker because I know the hype was there, and I know in her mind, I'm putting myself in her shoes. To not be able to play the game you wanted to is probably super frustrating. But I will commend her the whole game, even though she was struggling. She didn't even score the first half. Not a point. I just commend her for consistently trying to get back in the groove, get her shot up, not make it like, a lot of times when girls are off, they're like they force something or they maybe don't take the shot they would normally take. And her mentality also was very stable. It wasn't you didn't see any sort of emotion one way or the other. She was just trying to get back in the flow and it just like didn't happen. I felt really bad for her. She's one of our, she's the player to watch for them. I will just say their offensive rebounding was pretty phenomenal. I would just, as if I was, the Texas coach, I would just highlight that going forward. Like, look, guys, even though we missed how many shots, we were still able to get that stat up to something that's pretty insane. Like, I mean, shooting 2 of 16, that is absolutely rough. It's even worse when like South Carolina's perfect. They were 3 for 3 in that first quarter. But by halftime, Harmon kept them in the game. She had a nice 9 points. She took 2 back-to-back charges to start the third quarter. Carlton, the other post player for Texas, I thought she had some nice moves, taking the drive off the high post, even the 3-point line, and just being creative, trying to get baskets. I think it was such a struggle for Texas. And I'm going to commend South Carolina on that defensive end. Bree Hall played pretty locked up defense on Madison Booker. It was smothering. It was also once Madison got the ball, she respected that space but challenged it. And that's just, you don't really hear about girls being super locked in defensively. And I just think Madison Booker struggled offensively to shoot and score, but also had defense on her 24/7. So all in all, Pow Pow had a great game. She was perfect for the floor the first half. All players but 2 scored for South Carolina. Texas team Booker kind of got rolling in the second half. She finished with 7 points. She was 3 of 19 from the floor with 7 boards. Oldacre was super impressive. I think she came in, and I honestly wish she would start, but I understand you want to spark off the bench and you have your set folks. But she had 11 points and 16 rebounds. And again, that stems from 6 offensive boards in the first quarter alone. She got into foul trouble, as a couple of them did, so they were rotating players in to try to just get something, right? Moore, another one of their starters, she was also in foul trouble, just trying to get them going, even if it's just a post ISO or taking advantage of a mismatch from the wing. It was really a struggle for Texas. I commend South Carolina. Both of these teams come into this game with 1 loss and being kind of the juggernauts of the conference. So to see them go head to head, it was a good game for South Carolina, is what I'll say. What'd you think of it?
What a game this was. I equally agree with everything you've been saying. South Carolina versus Texas heading into this one. I mean, you and I picked the upset.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really thought Texas could be that team that knocks off South Carolina. South Carolina has won 67 straight home games. They've won 51 at this point, since they won this one, 51 straight SEC games. Ashlyn Watkins went out with an ACL tear last week. So we thought maybe Texas had the strength to knock off South Carolina at home, but not even close, really. I mean, from start to finish, South Carolina won possession after possession. So it was a little frustrating. And obviously for Texas, there was a lid on the bucket. I mean, they could not get anything to fall. And those nights are so tough. You talk about Booker doesn't score a point in the first half, like just tough to watch, but they didn't counter in any way to figure out some scoring. And that's hard to do against South Carolina. South Carolina's defense was phenomenal, I thought. They were tough shots for everybody. So you talk about Bree having to guard Booker. I mean, she really shut her down. She played great defense on her. So that's tough. South Carolina came ready for this one. A sold-out crowd, 18,000 people there. Great matchup here. It's just, you hate to see one team fall short like Texas did. And this is where maybe they take a couple bumps and bruises. And by the time tournament play comes around, they're peaking and they're ready to go, and they've learned from the Notre Dame and the South Carolina losses now, and they've got the depth to do it. So it'll be interesting to watch how they respond for sure. When I think about South Carolina, it's so interesting to me because I look at the stat line for Fagan, and I thought she was all over the place for South Carolina. She was getting blocks. She just seemed to be at the right spot at the right place at the right time for South Carolina. And I'm thinking to myself, man, Fagan, it's certainly in the first half, I'm like, this is the best game I've seen her play. I thought she was like glue for South Carolina. And I look at the stat line and I'm like, oh, she only had 4 points. She only had 3 blocks. Rebounds, she had a defensive rebound. It's kind of wild to me. Like she just was doing so many of the other intangibles, and it made it look like she had a great game. It's kind of wild. And I do think she had a great game, but stat line doesn't show it, right? So it's interesting.
That's the funny part about the intangibles, right? It can be always being in the right place at the right time. It can be making that extra pass. It can be getting that block out, but somebody else gets the rebound. It's just these things that, as long as you're consistent, and for you to obviously highlight her as somebody who did those intangibles, and you thought maybe, oh man, she has to be killing it. Let's see her stats. It's just things that probably don't show up on the stat sheet, but I agree with you. I thought she had a great game.
Another player that's really doing a ton of those intangibles, except for from the guard spot, is Pow Pow. I mean, she had a phenomenal game. She only had 11 points. Like, you look at the stats and you're like, against some of the other players in the country who are putting up 20, 30, sometimes 40 points, she has 11 points. All right. Nothing crazy there. She has 4 rebounds, 3 turnovers, 1 assist. But man, the efficiency from Pow Pow right now is really impressive. And she's also proving that she's not just a 3-point shooter. She's getting to the rack. She's becoming and is a solid leader for South Carolina right now. I just want to give a shout out to Pow Pow because I thought she had a phenomenal game as well in this one.
Absolutely couldn't agree more. I always find these games interesting when South Carolina had 22 turnovers and Texas had 12. So you would think, just from that stat alone, that Texas had it in the bag or it was going well for them. Took care of the ball way better than South Carolina, which Dawn Staley is going to be on them about that. But then going to the field goal percentage, this is where it's like kind of rough to even say, honestly. South Carolina was 26 of 51, 51% from the field. What a great night for them. From the floor, 51%, couldn't ask for anything more. The part that's just kind of makes you sick is Texas was 22 of 79. They got 28 more shots than South Carolina, and they were 28% from the field. I think if you were to just highlight that stat, it would tell you the entirety of this game and what it is. Another not fun stat is Texas's field goals this season against Notre Dame and South Carolina. Their 2 losses were 31% or under for the field goal percentage. All other games that they've won and it's been great and they've been rolling is around 50%. So definitely an out of character game for them. And the last not fun stat, Texas's previous season low point wise was 65. And now it was 50 from this game. So all in all, rough game for Texas for sure. South Carolina came, rose to the occasion, knew the lights were on, handled business. And Texas is just going to go back to the drawing board, see what they can do. To have losses against South Carolina and Notre Dame, the number 2 and number 3, isn't terrible. It's a learning curve. They're going to bounce back and they're going to come out on top and learn from it and move forward. But it definitely stings now.
It's interesting to think about the loss against Notre Dame and the loss against South Carolina because Notre Dame threw different zones at Texas, and you see South Carolina stick to their go-to man-to-man.
Yep.
And it's just interesting to see that they struggled with both types of defenses. So to your point, Texas, there's some really good teams they lost to, but I think they'll be able to bounce back here and we'll see what happens. All right, let's head into our third quarter. This is an interesting one. It's going to be a short quarter, but one that we wanted to give an entire quarter for because it was NCAA women's basketball history that happened on Sunday. So in the SMU versus Pitt game, welcome SMU to the ACC. SMU, with 1 minute and 37 seconds left to go in the first half, had 46 points. Pitt had 14. So Pitt was down by 32 points at one point.
And only had 14.
And only had 14. And we're talking, it's almost halftime at this point.
Yeah. Oh.
So they're down 32 points. They come back and win the game, which that's the NCAA record right there, to come back being down 32-point deficit and come back and win. But not only did they come back and win, they won the game by 13 points.
Nuts. That's crazy.
Crazy.
That is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, props. Amazing comeback. Okay, Pitt. No, I mean, that's just, I don't know what to say other than that's actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, so the record books now have been changed. And the final of that game was SMU 59, Pitt 72. So kudos to Pitt. Going into halftime, can you imagine?
I was just going to say, going into halftime having what, like 14 or just over, and then finish the game with 70-something?
It's insane.
It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah, so they didn't give up, and it paid off for them, even though they got down by 32.
That's my favorite number. You know that.
There it is.
No, amazing. And now you're in the record books. And not for a bad reason. Pitt, right? I'm not going to mention SMU, but I'm just going to say congrats, Pitt. That's absolutely amazing. Jumping into our fourth quarter. This is a tough quarter in the sense of there's just so many changes. And this is women's basketball, and this is when it really gets good. Conference plays among us. We talked about this. We've had some upsets in the first, month or two. You go play in abroad or, on an island somewhere over Thanksgiving, maybe things get caught up to you. But this whole quarter is dedicated to upsets. And boy, do we have a lot. We have 7 of them. 7 top 25 teams fell over the weekend. So our first one, and maybe some teams are in here a couple times, I'm just noticing that, so it's going to be rough. But our first upset is number 23, Iowa, lost to Illinois, 57-62. Iowa is also in here again. Again, they were ranked 23. The rankings will come out and all this will change for sure, but they lost to Indiana, 67-74. This is the first time that Iowa has lost 3 straight games since 2018. So Sid, I know we've talked about Iowa a lot. It's not fair to compare them to last year's team, but we are we're huge fans of Jan Jensen and what she can do and how she can coach and what she can make this team. But what are your thoughts just as on Iowa pops into our upsets twice? Yeah,
so the Iowa-Indiana game, we actually predicted that Iowa would win that one. So you and I were both wrong. I think we tend to lean towards Iowa being able to pull that one off. And I think it's interesting here. Jan Jensen is maybe at a crossroads. I think she's got to turn things around for Iowa, obviously, to lose 3 straight. So that's a great win, though, for Indiana.
Absolutely.
At Iowa, I mean, their 6-man is insane there.
Mm-hmm.
And Indiana's been very up and down this year. So maybe Indiana's getting a little bit more in the groove. And this is just kind of like one of those interesting matchups also. I think there's like some similar style that's played in different ways. So the Hoosiers coming out on top, that's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah. Gardoza from IU was 5 for 5 from 3 and technically 6 for 6, but they took the point away. But at the end of the game, you saw Coach Terry from IU and Coach Jan from Iowa exchange high fives and kind of a quick talk in the huddle. And you could tell Jan was frustrated. She was frustrated. And I think rightfully so. I think she has a lot of weight on her shoulders. The expectations are high. Iowa's still in the rankings. They weren't in the beginning of the year. So they fought to kind of get back on the map there. I just think they're still trying to find that consistency within the players that they have, right? And all the players that they have are players that were a part of last year's team, but they didn't have to be the consistent, right? They had Gabby Marshall, they had Kate Martin, Caitlin Clark. Those 3 alone brought something every game. Gabby's defense, Kate's consistency, and just like the team leadership. And then, you have Caitlin Clark just always going to bring buckets. So I just think they're trying to find that. So we're not giving up on the Iowa Hawkeyes. I think we're always going to stay fans of them, and we just hope they can bounce back. Jumping into some of these other upsets, number 14 Duke was upset by the number 19 seed UNC, 46-53. This one went into overtime. You always have the Duke UNC rivalry that kicks off, but I think we've mentioned Duke kind of struggling to score and kind of having their offensive presence, as well as we've mentioned this with UNC. So to see this one go into OT and both be super low scoring, kind of interesting. Any thoughts on that, Sid?
I think Duke really is struggling offensively from a consistency standpoint. You can't score 46 points against pretty much anyone at the Division I level, let alone in your conference in the ACC, and win a game. So that's a problem for them. They've got to consistently find that scoring for sure.
I'm going to jump to another team who's on our upset list twice here, Georgia Tech. Their first upset, they're the number 13 seed at the time. They were upset by Virginia Tech, 94-105, and this went into 2 overtimes. So we know Virginia Tech has a new coach, new players. Megan Duffy's there. Great to see her get a big time win. This is absolutely a big time win for her in the program. To follow that game, Georgia Tech also was just upset by Louisville, a score of 60-69. So back to back for Georgia Tech. As a 13 seed, they're probably going to drop pretty far out of the top 25. I'd be interested to see how low. Both teams were unranked, so they might even take them completely out of the top 25. Sid, what do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia Tech tries to bounce back from back-to-back losses like this. They've got to play Notre Dame Thursday on the road. Notre Dame is not going to take mercy on this game, so they've got to really figure some stuff out. That's going to be a tough putt for Georgia Tech. They might be losing 3 in a row.
Another one of our upsets that we wanted to mention was Oklahoma. They were the number 10 seed. They were upset by Mississippi State, 77-81. And then our last upset we wanted to highlight was number 17 West Virginia lost to Oklahoma State by a score of 57-64. So tons of upsets. It's conference basketball, and it's always going to be a good time. So make sure you all tune in, watch these games, and kind of see what's to come.
All right, Becca, so that will do it for today's episode. In our first quarter, we talked about the Tennessee-LSU game, LSU winning that one in Knoxville, 89-87. Our second quarter, we talked about South Carolina versus Texas and how South Carolina really ran away with that one. Our third quarter, we talked about Pitt's largest comeback in NCAA women's basketball history over SMU. And that fourth quarter was all about those upsets. Great talking to everyone. Be sure to download us, listen, follow along. We're excited to get some feedback from you all. Hit us up on our socials with any questions or comments. Becca, great talking to you.
You as well. Always a day of good basketball, especially in conference play. Never know what's going to happen. Tune in, guys.
It's heating up, that's for sure.
Absolutely. All right. I'll see you, Sid.
Talk soon, Beck.
That's the 28.5 final buzzer for today's episode. Don't forget to hit follow and download on your preferred podcast platform to catch every play-by-play. New episodes drop each week throughout the season.
If you've enjoyed our courtside chat, drop us a review or follow us on our social media accounts where you can send us questions that may be selected for our Team Huddle Q&A episodes. And remember, from females who have played the game, the size of the ball matters.